people that we like to work with and who like to use our resources. First of all, of course, is the Confluence Center. Javier and the staff are incredible and have been big supporters of the Learning Games Initiative since Confluence was started, possibly even before. So thank you so much, Confluence.
Just to add to that, you're probably all familiar with the fact that Confluence Center encourages interdisciplinary collaboration at the University of Arizona, and that's fantastic for the University of Arizona, but Confluence also encourages interinstitutional collaboration. They facilitate collaboration between the University of Arizona, for example, and Arizona State, where I'm at. And it's just an incredible thing to have an organization like that because it enables the citizenry of Arizona to be better served, not just locally, but across the state. So, and another round of applause for Confluence Center, if you please. Thank you.
We're also grateful to the College of Humanities, which largely sponsors our space and has sponsored a lot of our work over the years. And there are lots of folks here from the College of Humanities. So thanks very much to Dean Wildner-Bassett and to our colleagues in the College of Humanities. Yep, absolutely. Hooray. Next, we want to thank our interns. Judd and I really are figureheads at the front of this organization. We really just drink beer and play video games. It's the interns who do the work. So we're very grateful for the interns who do a lot of the heavy lifting for the archive. That is, they do things like they take 20,000 games and slowly enter them into a database. They take the odd artifacts for which there is no organizational structure in existence, and they invent one, and then they begin doing the data entry on that. I think we have at least one intern here, Stephen Hall. Stand up, Stephen. Stephen's been an incredible help on those kinds of things, and also on developing new projects. LGI also builds games and does a lot of research that then figures into both our games and other people's games. And Stephen's been very helpful with that. Just a quick note about Stephen. Some of you will get to know Stephen a little bit tonight because, unlike the last time, we will be having an interactive kind of component this evening. And so we've designated this area right here where Javier is and Yvonne and other folks. This area is going to be a hands-on area. So everything that we show you today, no matter how big, no matter how small or weird or valuable, will actually be circulating here. So if you're a thief or a gamer, you should probably be in this area, right over here. And Stephen will be helping us kind of move things along and also shuffle things back to their respective containers.
We lastly, second to lastly want to thank the Playground for hosting not only this show and tell, but the show and tell series. As Ken mentioned, we presented here a year or two ago, maybe, and it was just a great time, and we're delighted to be back. And one last thing, do please buy drinks and food and tip your waitresses and waiters and bartenders very handsomely, because they're working hard for you. All right? Thank you. So Javier obviously gave us a fabulous introduction, so you know who we are. We co-direct the Learning Games Initiative, which we started in 1999 and has been going strong since. We actually started the archive that same year, so it's been just about 15 years on the archive. The key components of the Learning Games Initiative are study, teach, and build. We study games, we teach with them, and we build them. We started the archive because in 1999, people were just starting to look at games a little bit more seriously, and we would go to conferences, and folks would start to talk about games, and they would say things like, well, unfortunately, I've never played this game, but let me tell you something about it. And we thought that was ridiculous. It would be like going to a Shakespeare conference and people saying, yeah, I'm going to talk to you about Macbeth, but I've never actually read the play. So we thought it would be a good idea to try to collect some resources for our own research and for other folks, and so that's what we've done. You want to talk about the archive? Or?
The archive has 11 satellite locations. The largest one is here in Tucson. It's on the U of A campus. It's open to the public. It is a public research archive, and everything in the archive circulates. This is a very unusual archival sort of principle. Many archives, as you know, are kind of white glove archives. Those are really important archives, and they practice a long-term kind of preservation strategy that Judd and I and everyone affiliated with LGI really value. But because video games are a kind of throwaway culture and are really dependent on a hands-on experience, it seemed to us when we were putting the archive together that to make them a white glove experience is kind of counterintuitive, actually, for the materials. And so we committed early on to basically letting anything in the archive be handled, be touched, be used, and also to be sent all over the world. And indeed, that's what we do now. So people who have research projects, no matter if they're well-known media scholars or second graders writing a report for school, as long as they can convince someone at the archive that what they're doing is research, they can come in, they can use any of the materials, and indeed they could take those materials back to their schools, back to their offices, and so on, and use them there. So it's kind of an unusual set of practices. The holdings themselves are enormous. We're not actually sure how large they are. We are pretty sure that the video games themselves are in the neighborhood of 20,000, around 20,000 games. The number of consoles is somewhere, we think, between 120 and 150 working consoles. Those are different. Those aren't duplicated machines. Those are all different consoles. So maybe some of you think that Xbox and PlayStation, maybe Nintendo are the only ones that exist. There are many, many more, hundreds more, in fact, and we have our 120 is a small percentage. Again, all of them work and all of them circulate. All of them are available for use. We also have a huge number of what we call paratext, and we'll show you both some of the games tonight, some of the hardware, and some of these paratexts. Paratexts are things that come out of the industry, out of the video game industry, but aren't games themselves. So that could be anything from promotional materials to the private papers or concept art from game designers to just weird memorabilia that has emerged over time for a particular popular or even unusual franchise. So all of those things are called paratext, that is sort of texts that circulate around the games, and many of our holdings are represented by that piece. The idea there is we think of our collection as representative, not comprehensive. That is, so that what that means is, if you are interested in The Legend of Zelda, you might come to us, and we probably, in fact, I'm sure we have The Legend of Zelda. We might even have a couple of versions of Legend of Zelda, maybe from different regions of the world, or maybe a remake. But we may not have every single version of Zelda ever made and released worldwide. But what we probably do have is we have much of the promotional materials. We may have some of the design work, the design art. We may have some of the legal documents that Nintendo had to produce as a result of lawsuits. We may have figurines. We may have musical instruments, all of which have been branded with the Legend of Zelda logo. And so what you'll do is you'll come in thinking you're studying Zelda, the game, and what you'll come away with is a much deeper sense of how big and how powerful is that cultural icon of the Legend of Zelda. So it's representative rather than comprehensive.
Just the last, here's our notes, I don't need to see those. The last thing we want to mention about our archival theory and practice is when hunting for games, when trying to add things to the collection, you would be amazed at the places that you would find these things. You don't typically go down to GameStop, although you can. Oftentimes you're going to go to a flea market, or you're going to go to a garage sale, or you might see games being sold out of the back of a car on your way up the Flagstaff. We've gotten games all these places. This is another way we get games and things like that, just random donations. This is a sack of games. Not exactly sure sure what's in there, but that's part of the fun of building an archive like this, is it's really all about discovery, not only in terms of the artifacts themselves when you study them, but when you see what people donate. So if you feel like you want to make a donation to the archive, you've got stuff sitting in the garage or in the closet you don't know what to do with, we're happy to take them. So we're going to start the show, and enough of the tell. We're going to start the show right now. Pretty much 3 themes for tonight. We're going to do hardware, software, and Paratext. That'll group the items together. And so we'll get cracking here. By the way,
since this is interactive, again, you'll get a chance to handle things over here. Feel free to walk over if there's just something that's of particular interest or you can't quite believe it exists. Swing on over to see that. But also, as you can tell from Judd's and my kind of interaction, we're quite open to interaction from the audience and each other. So feel free to interrupt us, raise your hand, shout out questions, and we'll field those as we go. And then at the end, we hope to have a little bit of time just for general questions if you have them. But seriously, I can't urge you enough. If you have a question, something occurs to you, shout it out. All right?
Yeah, we interrupt each other all the time, so you shouldn't feel any great restraint. Please interrupt us. First up, we thought we should show you basically a piece of software for the Intellivision, which was a console that competed against a couple other consoles. Probably the most famous would be the Atari VCS or Atari 2600, one that you might know, but also against the ColecoVision and the Vectrex and a number of others, sort of in the late 1970s, early 1980s. And so here you have the box for a licensed product for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, which for anybody who's played tabletop role-playing games, you're going to recognize. A couple of things to note about it. Here's the cartridge itself. Just a piece of plastic. It's mostly empty. This is where you plug it into the machine. And what you're looking at there is just the bottom of a PCB, a printed circuit board. And it's a tiny little piece of this. It's probably only about this big. And the rest is both a form factor for comfort and also to keep people from easily losing them and also easily pirating these kinds of things. One of the kind of fun things here that you'll note is this little guy, which is an overlay for the Intellivision controller to show you what the controls actually do. So you would load the game into the console, you would pop this onto the actual controller itself, and it would give you kind of a very limited early 1980s heads-up display. Okay? Oh. Here's the next guy. These are in just sort of random and fun order. This is a driving game called Test Drive. And one of the fun things about this, I'll try to zoom in on it. Yeah, there we go. Is the New York Times review of the game. And another fun piece of this, and I'll try to zoom in a little more here. These are the hardware requirements for the game. And I noticed that a 3.5-inch disc, right? These old 3.5-inch discs, that's like the upgrade. That's the ultra cutting edge. You can actually spend $5 more and get that. So this runs on a 5.25 floppy. Okay?
What's a floppy?
Here's some screenshots and description of it.
We have the game system showing up again. All right. So I'm sure you're desperate to know what this game is. This is a very fun game. We have actually this was part of a series in Japan, never released in the U.S. But this game is, I would say, moderately homoerotic. The series is really it's basically a third-person shooter. But we brought this in not only to highlight that. If you can kind of zoom in, you can see it's got a little bit of a BDSM quality. But this game was released in just a regular commercial release. Do the Muscle, and the graphics on it are quite striking throughout, both literally and metaphorically. What's among the interesting things, though, about this is that it did actually, the company did actually try to bring this to the U.S. market, and this was one of the titles in recent memory. This is for PlayStation 2, I believe. That was pretty roundly refused for the entire U.S. market. So I think a lot of times we like to think that much censorship doesn't exist all that much in this country. But in fact, in the game industry, there are lots of games that never make it to this country for political or sort of offensive material reasons. It's not that they couldn't, by the way, it's that games are expensive to make and distribute. And so really all a company has to do is, for instance, Walmart or GameStop, all they have to do is say, we won't sell it. And quickly the cost of distributing it locally becomes prohibitive.
By the way, if you have any additional questions about these games as they go around, Steven is definitely the person to talk to.
Especially that game.
Hey!
Next up, we have this little number. Not sure if you all recall, I had mentioned 3 1/4 inch floppy drives and 5 1/4 inch floppy drives. You guys also remember that games used to be distributed on cassette tape. And so this is for the Spectrum, I believe. Yep, this is for the Spectrum. And we're going to show you a cassette player later, but the way in which you would load this game onto memory is you would put it in your tape player, and it would play through 15 minutes or however long, load all the data into memory, and then you could play the game. So if you don't like load screens now, which are only a minute or something like that, imagine waiting 15 minutes or 20 minutes for this thing to load all the way through, and then you would flip it over and to load in the rest of the game.
You want your shot?
Here's a curious thing that we'll zoom out a little bit. So many people are probably familiar with Halo, but probably not many people. Actually, let's do this. How many people in here have played Halo? All right, a pretty good sample, very good. How many people have played Halo 2600? All right, good for you. Halo 2600 is what's called a retro game. Ed Fries, you see his name there at the bottom, he is actually the person who originally kind of designed and led the Halo franchise. Very, very popular game. Released on the Xbox originally, and then many iterations afterward. But there's an entire community, actually, not only in the US, but worldwide, who enjoys programming brand new games for antique systems. And Ed Fries is one of those people. And so, just a few years ago, is there a date on there? We'll find it. Just a few years ago, Ed Fries went from working on the Halo franchise for the most cutting-edge hardware to writing a version of Halo for the Atari 2600, a system several decades old. And so you can see from the back, and Judd can zoom in on this, you know, in an age where gamers talk about, they kind of gripe and envy about frame rates and high resolution, the idea that you would take one of the most popular and enduring high-end game franchises and remake it as an 8-bit game is kind of amazing. And what's especially amazing is this is a great game. It's a really great game. And so this brings us to the idea that, it reminds us that great games aren't made by the technologies, they're made by the designs that underlie them, and then the implementation on the systems for which, on which they run. This is kind of in a way, a kind of hybrid form here. How many people know what this is? You gotta look up at me. So there's it's not perverted. I know some of you are thinking that. For people who have been long-time gamers, or who are fans of antique systems know that one of the popular ways of fixing an old cartridge is by blowing on the PCB, the printed circuit board that Judd talked about a few minutes ago. That's actually not a great way to fix almost anything. But it does sometimes work, actually. But Nintendo saw an opportunity, and they developed this thing. And I'll let Judd describe this curious item.
So the blowing in the cartridge is the way to clean out the cartridge, right? How do you actually clean out the console? Well, you plug this bad boy in there. And that's designed to actually keep your console static-free and clean. These sorts of console cleaning devices are still around today. You can get one for the Xbox 360 or soon for the Xbox One or the PlayStation 4. And it's simply to prolong the life of the machine in the limited way that it does. And as you can see from the advertisement on the front of the box, regular cleaning keeps you in the game, keeps you from blue screening or from pixelating or all kinds of stuff. So there you have it. This would be something that you would buy. And here are some screenshots, actually, of the things this wonder device is guaranteed to prevent.
The top one here is my favorite, if Judd can zoom in on that. I love that they used valuable marketing real estate to show you empty screen. That is a big problem. The next thing, one of the things that we're quite interested in the archive is games from other countries, languages, and cultures. So we do have obviously quite a few games in English and Japanese. Those are two major markets. We have quite a few in Korean and some in Chinese. These are three games that were just donated. These are 3 games from Turkey. And what's kind of interesting about this is, if you know anything about, and I know there are actually Turkish scholars in the room, but what's interesting about these is that the nationalism comes across even in their video game advertising. You can see 100% Turkish up there at the top. So fascinating gesture there. And also just the kind of the simplicity. Turkey has several huge metropolises. Their game industry is only just starting. But what they have gotten very much into is mobile and web-based games. They don't have a particularly developed desktop or PC or Mac-based or console-based market, but it is growing. It's very expensive to get into. But they're clearly drawing on a number of both Western and Eastern traditions in game design. And those of us who study games find this incredibly interesting to look at these and be able to see both Eastern and Western influences on these designs. All right. Yeah, yes, I was in Turkey recently. Yes, it was awesome. What we're going to show you here is a little bit curious, but it's also very timely. Let's see. Up here, many people probably recognize this. If you're a gamer, you know a little bit about video games, the history of games. You know, and if you follow the news, you're familiar with this. E.T. is, by many accounts, the worst game ever made. Or if not the worst game ever made, and I think Judd and I would say it's actually quite good compared to some of the worst games ever made. But if it's not the worst game ever made, it's certainly the worst marketing campaign for a game. E.T. was brought out on the heels of the very popular movie E.T. They made far too many copies of the game. The game was poor, and also the video game market crashed at about this same time. And so hundreds of thousands of copies of E.T. were made, which were then never sold. Subsequently, They were dumped into a landfill secretly at night somewhere in the New Mexico desert, and buried and then filled in with concrete after it was discovered that people were going in and digging them up. The reason this is timely is because they're making a documentary about this weird thing right now. And so look for that at the Loft probably in the next year and a half or so. But here's the thing that's interesting about this from the archives perspective. Right here is a document. This is a document that traces and tracks all of the history of the game E.T. as it was being made and its many sort of financial and business missteps. When you plug this into an Atari 2600, which is the only way that you can read this document, it's full of pages of notes and scans of business reports. And so this is, as it says, it's an E.T. book cart. This is a piece of research. This is, in effect, a book about the making of the game E.T. This down here is a special edition. It includes a number of other materials, including interviews with people. Also, that only runs on the Atari 2600. And this was given to us. This cartridge here, which also runs on the 2600 exclusively, was given to us by the writers and researchers who worked on this project. And this is actually the prototype for these cartridges. So, as you can see, the archive has many things, not only things that went out in commercial production, but also donations and background and research materials that help us understand very much written about games and materials.
All right, so that's the software portion of tonight's presentation. Just a small sampling of some of the things that you might find in the archive. We have much more pedestrian things as well, Wii games, Xbox 360 games, Vectrex games, things like that. We've got tons and tons of stuff, but here are some things that are maybe slightly different. And again, we get stuff like the Bago games. We're going to move on to the hardware. Oh, he didn't make it on our list. Does anybody recognize this guy? Let me zoom in on him real quick. Anybody recognize him? Any World of Warcraft players? This is Leroy Jenkins. Leroy Jenkins, who you might know from YouTube videos, actually has his own World of Warcraft card now and his own World of Warcraft action figure. And so, if you don't know who Leroy Jenkins is, give his video a watch when you get home tonight. All right. So as far as the hardware goes, we're going to start off with it's right there. The Ultra Pong doubles, which if you are familiar with Pong or familiar with Atari, it might ring a bell for you. So this is the packaging for it. This should take you back to the late 1970s, perhaps even early 1980s. And Pong was a phenomenal hit for Atari. You can't have too much of a good thing, so Atari made tons and tons of sort of sequels, if you will. Quadra Pong, Pong doubles, in this case, Ultra Pong doubles, and each one, in essence, contained just further variations of that tennis game. So this is what you're looking at right here is the console. One thing to note that's different about consoles this era, as opposed to newer consoles, is that it's battery powered. It does not plug into the wall at all, so you pop open this slot, pump in a bunch of D batteries and go, which of course limits the playtime on it. You can see the list of games that are available there, and the very simple controller. So it's only limited to tennis-driven games, okay? And yet, it was quite a nice seller. This had 32 games actually, and up to 4 players. A lot of you have probably heard about the Oculus Rift, I suspect, since it was just recently purchased by Facebook. Who knows what will become of it, but this is about as big as we get. Well, here it is, if you want to turn around. This is the dev kit for the Oculus Rift. And so if you're interested in developing games for this apparatus, which is an immersive 3D apparatus, a big set of goggles, we can pull them out if you want. Prior to the purchase of the company by Facebook, you would buy this dev kit and you would use it to, are you going to model it? All right. Get your cameras out. This is Ken this is his Friday night wear usually. So you would order this dev kit and you would do your software development using it. Okay. This is not a very old device, and once it was sort of a rarefied piece of machinery. Now, Facebook's purchase of the company, it will become much more commonplace. But instead of needing a special development kit now for it, all you need is the Unity engine, which has a little 5-minute plugin that compiles whatever it is that you develop to make it 3D compliant. So you slap these goggles on, and all of a sudden the game is fully immersive 3D. Okay? Here's another fun game, Electronic Detective, the computerized whodunit game. Obviously, over 100,000 different murder mysteries. I'm not sure if you recognize this guy right here. Anybody have a clue? Yeah, it's Don Adams. Absolutely, it's Maxwell Smart. And so this is another kind of early game. So whereas you might have something like the Oculus Rift, which is really cutting-edge technology for game development, here's something that's almost 40 years old. Okay, one of our preferred nomenclature in the archive for anything like this, whether it's the Oculus Rift or the Xbox One or even Electronic Detective, we like the term computer game versus video game, because video presupposes a visual component, and there are plenty of games around that have no visual component whatsoever. Think about games for the blind. Okay? And if you haven't played any games for the blind, you should give them a crack, because they're really a lot of fun. They're all sonically based. There's no visual interface whatsoever. Fundamental to any kind of electronic interactive game is the idea of computation, of counting, right? Having the computer do all the processing for you. So we prefer that. And in this instance, you have this notion of computation here. Here's the back, just so you can get a good peek at it. All right. You want to see this? Here's another classic. Okay, so game consoles, historically, it was a challenge to market them. Okay? Folks tried to market them as toys, as entertainment devices, even as computers. They're fairly expensive even today, and so it's a fairly heavy investment for a family. And so one of the things Atari tried to do was to market a machine that was both a computer and a game-playing device. So kids, when they would beg their parents for something, could play up the computation side, but obviously knowing full well that it would be a game device. And here's such a device. It's the Atari 400. If we pop open this, you can see there's a slot for a game cartridge, okay? But you also have the look of a computer, personal computer. What you have here, too, is a membrane keyboard. I'm not sure how many of you know what membrane keyboards are, but they're in many ways a precursor to the touch screens we have today. There's no moving part there. You simply press on the sensor directly. Now, we had mentioned before, and we had showed you that that cassette game. If you were to buy the Atari 400, this would be your data drive that you would purchase with it if you wanted to develop your own programs. So if you were interested in programming or saving things like that, this would be your recording device as well as your playback device if you purchased games that were on cassette.
So up next is one of Judd's favorite games. It's quite common that, remember I mentioned that the interns do the work and we don't? This is what we do instead. We play Mattel Baseball and Mattel Electronics. Anyone played this before? I hear a couple of voices of recognition. Yeah. So this was a game. It's not quite games for the blind, although it might make you blind trying to play it. It just uses a set of LEDs, or LCDs, I think actually, an LCD array. And so what Judd is doing on the keypad there, on this very early mobile game, is running and passing and taking turns, and it's just passing from one blinking light to another. So you really had to have a fantastic imagination to be able to discern teams. Some of these came as two-player devices, by the way. You could play against each other. This one, you can play two-player, but you have to hand it back and forth.
One of the things you want to notice on this as it comes around is because the graphics are so limited, basically LCDs, the imagery is offloaded onto the physical case. This is an actual model of a football stadium. Here are the bleachers. This would be the press box, and then you can see the lines and the grass and so forth.
All right, this next one's a little bit, we have to be a little bit careful. This is, what we're going to show you next is the Magnavox Odyssey. This was the first cartridge-based video game system. It's one of the older items that we've got in the archive.
I think you guys are going to have to look as it comes around. It comes in its own case, its own suitcase, so you can take it from place to place.
We will show you the individual parts, though. We'll try anyway up here. So here's your joystick, right here. That's a beauty. Also comes with paddles on the side. It's a multi-purpose device. You all still have that connector, right? That's great. I think Judd probably can't quite get it all the way in the shot, maybe. But it also comes with dice, a pair of old-fashioned dice, not computer-generated dice, but actual dice, because the computer wasn't powerful enough to actually generate random numbers. Turns out that dice are actually better at doing that than computers anyway, even to this day. So it kind of works out. We have a couple of accoutrements for that. The Magnavox Odyssey came with this, a rifle. This is back before things like this had to have some kind of orange muzzle or something. And it's a fairly realistic look. It doesn't feel very realistic, but yeah, it came with that game, or was an add-on. And then this is what the games look like, and you can kind of get a sense. But I would recommend actually Judd holding that up. This is what game boxes used to look like. So this is Fun Zoo for the Odyssey. The game cartridge is quite small in there. It's not particularly surprising, given what games look like today. It's not uncommon, but it does come with these overlays, because the overlays for your television had to be large enough that they could be mounted directly onto the screen. Those of you familiar with black and white TVs will appreciate the fact that this is color. This gives you color television, in effect. And those of you who are fans of antique television may know about a predecessor of this called Winky Dink and You. Anyone ever watch Winky Dink and You? Oh, a couple of people, all right. Winky Dink and You was actually a broadcast television show, animation, where there was a cartoon character who would find himself in different kinds of fixes, let's say. He would get into different kinds of trouble. He would fall down a hole, for instance. And there would be a commercial break, and you would have to have purchased a Winky Dink and You kit from the store. And when Winky Dink falls down a hole, or he needs to climb up a bush or something, during the commercial break, you would draw the ladder that Winky Dink needed onto the screen, onto this overlay, and then when the break was over, you'd come back and Winky Dink would in fact climb the ladder that you had just drawn onto the screen. So this is one of the earliest, maybe not computer game in that case, but it certainly was an early video game. All right, what do we got next?
All right, here is an early handheld, the Sega Nomad. Some of you may have actually had the Sega Nomad before. One of the fabulous things about this is that it was a handheld system, a portable system, that actually played cartridges from the full-sized console. So if you owned the Sega Genesis, you could actually purchase the Nomad and take your games with you. The unfortunate thing about the Nomad, I mean, it's a beautiful thing. It's a little bit big, but it's got a nice full-color screen. The unfortunate thing is that it is also battery-driven, as you would expect any portable system to be. And so if you take something that uses the computational power of a console and also has a very detailed and high-resolution color screen, it sucks batteries like there's no tomorrow. So you might get an hour's worth of play out of this thing before you'd have to change all of the batteries inside of it. So it really wasn't that portable. You could take it in the car when you went to soccer practice, but then you would need to have it plugged in while you played in order to play it when you got back.
Yeah, we're going to show you the inside of this in just a second. Let's unpack it.
That's the full cartridge slot right there.
We have a surprise visitor who's actually brought a couple of items that he's offered to, I may have misheard, but I think I heard donate to the archive, and so he's going to show. How about a round of applause for Ryan, who's donating his stuff?
So this is a very early version of Donkey Kong. It's a little hard to see, but it's a Nintendo Game & Watch, multi-screen, and if you look at the back, it's sort of hard to see, but anyways, made in Japan and from 1982. It's a multi-screen game. Can you zoom out?
That's sweet.
Is it in the air? Yeah, there we go. And it offers two game modes. One is the slow game, and then the other is the faster version. Anyways, it does have a speaker, and it does play just little beeps. It's not very... That's all it is. And the other thing I'll show off is a very old swatch. This is from about the same time, probably about early 80s. And I'll show you what's unique about it is that it is designed as a sort of pocket watch. So you can take it out and you could interchange the bands and you could mix and match different colors if you had multiple versions.
Round of applause for an interloper in the presentation. I told you this is interactive. Thanks, Ryan. That's awesome. Very good. Hey, quick kind of intermission. This is another interactive portion. One of the things we do at the archive, kind of by necessity, is we get a lot of donations, as Judd mentioned, but sometimes we get things that are donated and we have no idea what they are. And so we give presentations like this fairly often, and we try to bring at least one item that we don't know what it is. And we ask the throngs if they know what it is, and I would say probably about 30% of the time we get an answer. So I'm going to present this item. We do not know what this is. We've looked at a lot of systems.
It's like this, which is it's.
And we will pass this around. If you think you know a lot about game history or weird game stuff, or strange hardware interfaces, please look at this and see if you can figure out what it is. All right?
So there are lots and lots of different kinds of peripherals available for games. It's astonishing when you look across the history of the medium, just the remarkable number of ways people interact with it. And here is just one of the random weird ways to interact with, and this is actually a fairly modern one. These are maracas for the Wii. So if you're interested in playing a rhythm game, rather than using the joystick, or jumping on a dance pad, or even banging on some bongo drums, here you can be festive with your maracas. This may be familiar to for the hardcore Call of Duty players. Yep, so somebody knows what it is already, and it's a little hard to see on here, we'll pass it around. This is actually the Call of Duty Black Ops RC car. Excuse me, the controller has a little screen on it, the car has a camera, and you can drive the car around and see around corners and all kinds of fun things like that. All right, here's here's something that many of you will recognize instantaneously, though probably not in this, never having seen it in this form. Yes, that is the Wu-Tang Clan themed controller. And so this is an actual usable game controller, but based on the band and its insignia. Okay, we're going to move on to the, oh boy, we're running out of time here. We're going to move on to the last section of our show and tell. We had done the hardware, we just did the hardware. Prior to that we did the software, now we're on to the Paratext. These are the things that are game related, but not necessarily game hardware or software. Here's something that, for the intrepid among you, it's the World of Warcraft board game. And as you can see, it's a fully licensed thing, up to 4 players. And that's the board and the cards and the action figures that you use right there, that you use to play. Okay? This is not uncommon. Some games lend themselves to adaptations like this. Others, like Tetris, you would think wouldn't, or Myst wouldn't, and yet there are board games for both of those games. Here's another type of electronic interactive game. This is a VCR-based game. So you play along with cards, and you use your VCR to get branching narrative for the game. So you'll get a card that turns up and says you need to play the story at X place, 35 minutes in, so you have to fast forward in, watch the segment, and then go back to the game. Yes, fast forward and rewind. Scrub, I guess, in today's parlance.
So Judd mentioned again games that have significant audio components. Obviously, things like Rock Band and Guitar Hero would be among those games. But here's the new iteration, or a newer iteration of that. This is Guitar Hero sheet music. So if you want to play the songs for real that you play in Guitar Hero, you can go get some lessons and learn the music, right? There's Killer Queen by Freddie Mercury. All right.
So we get lots and lots of books, printed materials, comic books, scholarly books, magazines, trade publications, things like that. We don't just collect computer game stuff. That's the primary emphasis, but we're interested in game stuff of all types because they inform how computer games are designed, how people interact with them, and so forth. And so here's an example of a scholarly study about games in general. And this is about European board games. Okay? Just your straight up scholarly stuff. Here's another continental study of stuff related to games, and this is about toy culture, and it's by a Finnish scholar. And it's actually a lovely book. If you get the opportunity to take a look at it close hand, it's got lots of lovely pictures. Right, coming up. Okay, so last time we brought... Yeah, speaking of adult play, which is the title of this last book, Principles of Adult Play. Last time we brought porn. This time we brought some porn as well. We're only going to show you the front side of the box, so to speak. Tomb Raider XXX. There's a remarkable breadth to game culture, and not surprisingly, there's pornography associated with it. This is actually a movie shot in glorious HD, and there are lots of these. There's Grand Theft Orgy, all sorts. So anyway, Call of Booty, Modern Warfare, yes. As Ken had mentioned, we are interested in game culture from around the world, and as scholars, we're particularly interested in game scholarship from around the world. And we have lots and lots of stuff in various languages. Here's something by a German anthology, all about games. Unfortunately, neither of us read German, so we don't know if it's any good. But if you're interested in game studies and do read German, by all means, come up and take a peek. All right. So, Atari, we've mentioned that company a fair bit tonight, didn't just make game consoles and didn't just make games. They made other hardware as well. And one of the fun pieces of hardware they made is this apparatus right here. It's a visualizer for your music. So in the 1970s, you would plug your hi-fi into your television, and and you would play your music. And this system, here's a model of it. We actually have the console back at the archive. Here it is, the Atari Video Music. It would generate geometric shapes in time with the music. Not unlike the visualizer you would get with iTunes, for example.
All right. Some of the more curious things in the archive are stored in a flat file. Anybody who's been there and has kind of rummaged through the flat file has seen what we're talking about. There are a lot of promotional materials, but there are quite a few artists who have worked in textiles and have decided to make things like curtains and couches and so on, pillows, out of materials that are drawn from video games. So you can see, you got Mario, you got Pac-Man, you got the Cube. This one's a little challenging from Portal, Aperture Industries, Aperture Laboratory.
If you're interested in doing these sorts of handicrafts, you can actually go online and, again, make bedspreads or recover your couch or things like that. We do have, we have an opportunity here, which is one of our interns went home to Japan 2 summers ago and brought back a bunch of Japanese themed game stuff for us. And one of the things she brought back was Pokemon fish sausage. And so, since it is about preservation through use, we actually tried and opened a package of the fish sausage, and this is what it looks like. And we have an opportunity for someone who's interested in trying this game-themed delicacy from Japan. If somebody would like to try one of these, you are more than welcome to.
We get photographic privileges.
That's right. We do need to see a picture of you actually eating it.
So, as you know, the 30th anniversary of Pac-Man passed not too long ago, and some of us in the Academy really like our Moleskines. And this was a donation made to the archive of a tribute Moleskine, so it's a standard thing, but it's branded with Pac-Man. One of the things you can't see because of this band is that there's actually a little game unfolding underneath this and then throughout the book. It's a cute little idea.
So here are some, see if we can zoom out a little bit, souvenir Hot Wheels cars. So we've got Tempest, Pong, and Centipede. I can't remember, I think there was, actually there's the display up there, 6 of them. We brought 3. You can see the other ones on the back here. Missile Command, Breakout, and these are licensed Hot Wheels. The idea is a sort of a marketing tie-in, but for a retro market. So these wouldn't necessarily be Hot Wheels you would buy for your child today, but something that you would give as a stocking stuffer, as a fond gift for someone who remembers these games. All right, we'll do that afterwards? All right, perfect. We've got a willing soul for the fish sausage, so we'll... What you're looking at here, it's tempting, we've talked a lot about the 1970s tonight. It's tempting to think that that's when computer games originated, because the first commercial games actually the very first commercial game was released in 1972, which seems like ancient history to a lot of us. But games have actually been sort of in the scientific unconscious and the engineering unconscious for much longer. This is actually a copy of a patent from 1948 by Goldsmith and Mann. And it is for a cathode ray tube amusement device, which is a fancy name for a video game. Right? And Goldsmith and Mann and television inventors before them were interested in seeing what the medium could do. And one of the things that they were interested in is obviously a cathode ray tube, a television screen, or obviously now we have LCDs and LEDs, but prior to that we had cathode ray tubes, and one of the things that they can do obviously is display imagery, but they were interested in being able to manipulate the imagery on the screen itself, and so this is a patent for that.
It'll take us a minute to extricate this next piece, which is quite small. There it is, very easy. Hopefully we can zoom in on this. It's not uncommon, as you've seen from all of these paratexts, for games to influence games that influence games. What you're looking at is a Geocoin. It was a quarter at some point in its life, but there are probably some geocachers here. This is a worldwide game. Things are hidden. Millions of items are hidden all over the world. If you know how to find them, you can, and we walk by them all the time. Well, this is a very, very elaborate geocache that's planted actually in Austin, Texas, by Lord British, a famous game designer. And after it takes, usually a geocache will take somewhere between 10 minutes and an hour to find. To find this geocache, you can count on a minimum of 8 hours to find. Very, very elaborate, takes you all over the city of Austin. And at the end, instead of just pulling a little thing out of a tree stump or something, there's actually a building that you have decoded the security code for. You type it in, and inside are all these weird things that people have left there as prizes, as well as a coin stamping machine. And so you drop in a quarter, and you turn the crank, like at a lot of amusement places, and it stamps your quarter with an image of Lord British and the name of his upcoming estate. So very, very elaborate. So this is a game within a game, done by a famous game designer.
Up next, we have this fabulous thing, which is, I just mentioned that games already went back to just the post-World War II era. They actually, the companies involved in games actually date far before that. Nintendo being one of them. Nintendo actually started out as a playing card manufacturer, and they've manufactured all kinds of crazy stuff over the last century plus, including heating pads and things like that. This is one of the things they were famous for before games were playing cards, or Hanafuda cards. And this is actually a game-themed souvenir Hanafuda card collection. So it came in this game-themed box, this Mario-themed box, and inside are are the actual playing cards themselves. Zoom in. So it's recalling its original history and then also its updated history. So those are some of the symbols of the cards right there. We also collect art, game-themed art. Here's a piece. Some of you will recognize the iconography. Others of you will probably recognize the artist. If you've been to Tucson Tamale Company, you see Mel Dominguez's art all up on the walls. Mel did this, and it's an homage to Pac-Man. Which one? Oh, both.
We've got several hundred comic books in the archive devoted to games, video games. Developers discovered, or publishers discovered early on, that a great way to market games was not only through game stores and so on, but also through comics. And so here are a couple of early ones. This is Atari Force number 5 and I think number 9. And so you can obviously see that it's branded by Atari, but when you turn it over and then scattered throughout, you'll see advertisements by Intellivision, by Atari, and other companies. But you'll notice that we actually showed you Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and lo and behold, there it is. Similarly, it's never too soon to get your kids hooked on video games. Why not give them a children's book? Tell the cute, touching story of Ms. Pac-Man and her trip down the river. Read us an excerpt. And you can see here the ghosts. They make an appearance, for sure. Not far away, the ghosts were coming out of the wrong exit of the swamp maze. Yow! Screamed Inky, as the hungry alligator almost got him in its jaws. This never happens to the Pac-Man family, complained Pinky. There you go. And then last but not least, of these comics, this is a much sort of higher end, higher production value comic, as you can see, verging really on a graphic novel for the game Mass Effect. The thing that really amuses me about this is that it says right here on the front, from the lead writer of the blockbuster BioWare video game Mass Effect 2. And then it doesn't tell you what that person's name is, which tells you that what's really important here is the game, not the author.
All right, so this arrived in the mail a couple of years ago. That's a sentry from Team Fortress 2 with a pair of reindeer ears on it, and this is our Team Fortress 2. If you're familiar with that game, these are Team Fortress 2 themed holiday cards. There you have the medic and the bone saw carving up the turkey, the scout. Here's the dispenser. You have a line from the game with all of these characters and so forth. Okay? And this is last, and certainly not least. We're lucky enough to know the son of the designer of the very first text-adventure game, Hammurabi. And he donated his father's papers to the archive. And his father was a super interesting guy. The game that he designed, Hammurabi, ran on mainframes. And he developed it in, I think it was 58. And it was really not because he was a game designer, but because he was a computer programmer and engineer and was interested in trying to demonstrate what the machinery could do. So we have his papers, and he worked at, I don't know if you can see that, he worked for the Rand Corporation. He also worked for RCA, and he worked for IBM. And you'll notice on all of these papers, this thing. The idea of confidential. These were cutting-edge secrets, cutting-edge paperwork from these companies, not to be shared. Here's another one, company confidential. It's just fascinating that game design becomes part of the intellectual property of these large-scale companies, many of which were involved in the defense industries, other which were involved in heavy industry development, and then research and design of computers in general.
That's it for the show part, except I am told that there is somebody willing to eat the fish sausage. And I think that person should come forward right now. Where is the fish sausage? If I can get someone with a camera up here. Where is the fish sausage? Where did it go? No, you don't have to eat all of it.
You want so much. Can't eat just one.
I think we might need a knife. Somebody got a knife? Does it? I think it's made for kids, so.
I have a knife.
Why am I not surprised, Sonia? Yeah, it's actually it's probably not more than a year or two old. Probably.
This is what it looks like. Very appetizing. How's it taste?
It's got a smoky taste. Doesn't taste like fish. It does not taste like fish.
Can you feel the gill?
It feels like some soy Monsanto product, probably.
All right, how about a hand for our brave beta tester? All right. That's the end of the show part. We're happy to entertain questions. There's still things floating around. But again, buy drinks and tip the bartender. Thanks to all of you for coming out.